All right, we're going to continue with our study of Duffy poetry. Today we're going to look at originally. Okay, look at originally. Yes. All right. So, um, let's get into it. Okay, here we go. All right, so it begins. We came from our own country. Obviously, take notes here. We came from our own country in a red room, which fell through the fields, our mother singing, and so on. All right, so what is the poem about? What is the poem about to begin with? Okay, if it's saying we came from our own country, then the poem is what you could call a travel. It's a travel poem. In other words, the poem is about the speaker, meaning the person talking, going from one place to another place, which might sound very familiar to you if you just watched the video on Mrs. Telsher's with the idea of change, going from one place to another place. And yes, the poem is about essentially the same thing. Okay, so it's about the same idea of moving from one thing to another thing, going from one place to another place. And it's the same as Mrs. Telsher's, and it's the same as also the way my mother speaks, in that it's the idea of change, going from where you are, or where you were, sorry, to where you are now, which is going from being a child to being an adult, or moving towards adulthood. Okay, so the we here is the speaker and her family came from our own country, again, where they were, okay? Came from our own country in a red room, which fell through the fields. It's talking about a train or some kind of vehicle. Our mother singing our father's name to the turn of the wheels. Okay. My brothers cried, one of them bawling, home, home, and his mouths rushed back. Okay, so the initial reaction to moving from where they were to, where they're going or where they are now, okay, from the past to the present, changing from being a child to being an adult. The initial sort of reaction to that is one of sort of being sad and like not liking it. Okay. So to begin with, the speaker doesn't like the change. Okay. At the beginning of the change, moving, the speaker doesn't like it. It makes them feel sad. It makes them feel upset, and they want to go home. Okay. They want to go home. They want to go home. Okay. As the miles rush back to the city, the street, the house, and so on, we don't live in anymore. I stared at the eyes of a blind toy holding its paw. Okay, so the speaker you can imagine is sitting on the train. They have a toy. Again, toy represents childhood. Okay, so where they're leaving, so what they're leaving behind, childhood. And the idea that the toy is blind, toy can't see, what does that mean? What does that mean? Um, maybe the idea is that childhood, like the toy, okay, when you have a child, just like the toy, it's hard to see what comes after it because children are still innocent or blind, if you like, to the real world, the adult world, if you like. So the toy, in a sense, represents the blindness of children to the grown-up world, the real world, which is where the speaker is heading. Okay, does that make sense? Like holding its paw, again, maybe comforting itself, just like the speaker is comforting herself, doesn't want to grow up, doesn't want to leave being a kid, doesn't want to leave her home, wants to stay a kid. Basically, that's the idea. Okay. Now, this quote here, this sentence here, is the most important quote in the whole poem. I think I would say with confidence, this is the most important quote in the whole poem, basically. So make sure you write this one down. Yeah, all childhood is an emigration. Okay, emigration means moving from your home country to another country to migrate. Um, and again, the whole point of this is illustrated. Okay, all childhood. It's moving from one thing to another. It's moving from being a kid to being an adult. Okay, that's the idea, yeah? All childhood is moving from where you are to where you're going to be, which is from being a kid to being an adult. Okay, that's this meaning. All right. Some are slow, leaving you standing, resigned up an avenue where no one you know stays, meaning the transition between the transition or the growing up, the change, okay, can be slow and it can be isolating because you don't know anyone. You know, as you start to change, you might start to lose friends and all that stuff. Others are sudden, your accent wrong, corners which seem familiar, and so on. what she's basically describing, okay, is the difficulties faced by kids when they start to grow up. And she's using the metaphor of a person leaving their home and moving to a new country as a representation of how it feels for kids when they start to grow up and start to uh, interact with and get introduced to the grown-up world. Everything's new. They don't know how to speak properly. They don't know they don't know how to act fully. They might not have the adult relationships, like maybe their childhood friends. Uh, they might disconnect from them. You're probably experiencing a lot of these things already yourself, especially if you're in the more senior years, like fifth year, sixth year, something like that. Probably a lot of your childhood friends from primary school, you probably don't talk to them as much anymore. Also, you're probably feeling nervous about what's about to happen next when you go to university or go to college or start work, apprenticeship, whatever it is. So she's basically illustrating all that, yeah? She's illustrating all of that. Okay. Eating worms, shouting things you don't understand. Okay, my parents' anxiety stirred like a loose tooth in my head. I want our own country, I said. So even the parents are nervous about moving to this new place. And obviously, that's a reflection of how parents feel when their kid is starting to grow up and starting to leave behind the kid version of them. Okay, it starts to make parents nervous. Will they be okay? Will they know what to do? Will they be a good person when they grow up and all that? Okay, I want our own country, I said. So up to this point, the speaker still doesn't feel excited or good about growing up or about moving to this new place. They want to go back. They want to go backwards. It's the same as in Mrs. No, it's not. It's the same as in the way my mother speaks when she's on the train, thinking of her mum's words because she feels nervous about what's about to happen. She doesn't necessarily want to go forward into adulthood. She wants to go backward to where she started from. Okay, same idea, yeah. Okay. But then you forget or don't recall or change, and seeing your brother swallow a slug, feel only a skilf, a little bit of shame. I remember my tongue shedding its skin like a snake. Okay, so up until this point, the speaker has been reluctant and also not just reluctant, but didn't want to grow up. They wanted to go backwards. They want to stay as a kid. They want to stay in their home country. But now they're starting to change. They're starting to forget about what they were like as a kid. They've started to transform. Basically, that's the idea. Okay, they're starting to transform in terms of the literal meaning. They're starting to fit in to the new place that they've moved to. They started to speak. So here, this quote: "My tongue shed its skin like a snake." Her accent is starting to change. Okay, the way she speaks is starting to change. Uh, which is what she's saying. Okay, my voice in the classroom sounding just like the rest, meaning she's starting to speak like the people around her, the new people around her. Again, metaphorically or in terms of the main theme, change or going from childhood to adulthood, she's now starting to speak like an adult, like a grown up, okay, or a teenager. Both are correct, yeah. So either if you want to say adulthood meaning adolescence meaning teenager, that's correct. If you want to say adulthood like becoming a grown up, that's correct. Both are correct, okay. All right. Do I uh do I only think I lost a culture river speech? Um excuse me. Excuse me. Okay, do I only think I lost a culture river? Um, do I only think I lost a culture river speech sense of the first place? What's going on? Okay, here we go. All right, so what she's saying now, do I only think I lost a culture river sense of the first place, space and right place? Now where do you come from? So what she's saying basically is she's starting to question um the transition or the movement in terms of what she's lost. So it's not just a physical thing she's lost, which she's lost obviously her where she started from, like the city she used to live in, the streets and all that stuff, um, and the old culture. But she's saying now also that she has sort of lost or given up the identity she had as a kid. Okay, which is why when people ask her, "Where do you come from originally?" and I hesitate, meaning she's asking them, now she has two answers to the question of where she comes from. One is where she comes from originally, meaning where she was, and the second is where she comes from now, as in what she identifies as her sort of new home or who she is now. Okay. In a simple way, she's saying she's left the old place behind, including all the streets, the rivers, and all that, what it used to look like. She's left all that behind. And also, in a sense, she's left her who she was behind as a kid. She's left that behind too. So by the end of the poem, the speaker has now sort of embraced being a grown up. She's not all the way there, okay, as in because she still hesitates. So she hasn't fully grown into it, but she started to embrace the idea of growing up. Okay, she started to embrace the idea of growing up. She's not reluctant anymore. She doesn't want to go back to being a kid now. Now she's sort of embraced the idea of growing up and she has sort of moved on past uh, being a kid. Okay. All right, quickly, some quotes for you. Here you go. We came from our own country. There's one. My brothers cried. There's two. All childhood immigration. Three. Um, I want our own country. Four. But then you forget five. Or I remember my tongue shed its skin like a snake. Five. Um, where do you come from? Strangers ask. Originally, and I hesitate. Six. Okay, there you go. So there's your quotes, and there's the poem. It's very simple. Key theme again is change, specifically in terms of change from childhood to adulthood. Okay, and um yes, so you compare this poem, okay, off with Mrs. Tosha's class, The Way My Mother Speaks, and what's the other one? Mrs. Tosha's class, The Way My Mother Speaks, originally. What's the other poem about childhood? Okay, I forget the other one, but anyway, you compare it off with those two, yeah. So Mrs. Tosha's class and also The Way My Mother Speaks, they're all three about the same thing, okay? So in your 10 mark or your 8 mark, just compare, well, not compare, but you can use those and they'll work well for that. Okay, if you have any questions, just put it below and I'll see you guys soon, okay? Take care.